The city, a sprawling metropolis of neon lights and towering skyscrapers, pulsed with an energy that never seemed to sleep. Dani, a young woman with eyes as dark as the night sky, moved through the labyrinthine streets, her footsteps echoing in the deserted alleyways. She was a ghost in the city, a hacker who lived in the shadows, a rebel against the oppressive regime that controlled every aspect of life. Tonight was different. Tonight, Dani had stumbled upon a secret that could change everything. A hidden message, a cryptic code, a promise of freedom. It had been left by a mysterious figure, a ghost from the past who had vanished into the city's underbelly. Dani followed the trail, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. She knew the risks. The corporation that ruled the city was ruthless, and they would stop at nothing to protect their power. But Dani was determined. She had seen the suffering, the injustice, the control that the corporation exerted over the people. She had had enough. The neon lights cast a kaleidoscope of colors on the wet pavement as she darted from one shadow to the next. The city's AI security systems were everywhere, their drones buzzing like mechanical wasps, but she knew their patterns, their weaknesses. She had been preparing for this moment her whole life. The message led her to a grimy, nondescript building, one that seemed out of place in the gleaming corporate utopia. She slipped inside and descended a flight of stairs that reeked of mold and decay. The walls were plastered with graffiti, a silent protest against the gleaming towers that loomed above. At the bottom of the stairs, she found what she was looking for, a door that was slightly ajar. Beyond it, she could hear the faint murmur of voices. She took a deep breath, steeled herself, and pushed the door open. The room was dimly lit, filled with figures hunched over screens and circuits. The air was thick with the scent of burnt metal and wires. These were the rebels, the ones who had been fighting the system for as long as she could remember. They looked up at her with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "I have information," she announced, her voice shaking slightly. "Information that could change the game." The room went quiet, all eyes on her. She felt their scrutiny, their doubt, but she also felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could finally take a stand against the corporation that had crushed so many dreams. One of the rebels, a man with a scar that cut through his eyebrow, stepped forward. "What's your name?" he demanded. "Dani," she said, holding out the small data chip. "And this is the key to their downfall." The scarred man took the chip, his eyes narrowing. "What's on it?" "Proof," she replied, her voice steady now. "Proof of their lies, their manipulation. It's enough to start a revolution." The rebels exchanged glances, the tension in the room palpable. Finally, the man with the scar inserted the chip into a nearby console and began to scroll through the data. The screens flickered with encrypted information, numbers, and images that made the group's stomachs turn. It's everything we've ever suspected," he murmured. "And more." The room erupted into a roar of whispers and shouts. Some were eager to act, while others urged caution. Dani could feel the excitement building, the potential for change. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment she had hoped would come. A woman with a shaved head and piercings that glinted in the low light spoke up. "We need to get this information out. The people have to know." A plan began to form, a daring heist to infiltrate the corporation's mainframe and broadcast the incriminating evidence across the city. It was risky, but it was their only chance. They worked tirelessly, night after night, preparing for the operation. Dani's skills were invaluable, her knowledge of the city's digital infrastructure allowing them to navigate the corporation's defenses with precision. The rebels grew to trust her, to rely on her, and she found herself becoming a part of something larger than she ever imagined. The day of the attack arrived, and Dani's nerves were strung as tight as the wires that connected the city's endless web of screens. They approached the corporate tower, a gleaming beacon of power that pierced the smoggy sky. The drone patrols were heavier than usual, but she remained focused. Inside, the air was cool and clean. The walls were lined with screens that displayed the faces of the corporation's leaders, their smiles as cold as the steel that supported the tower. Dani's heart raced as they moved through the labyrinthine corridors, dodging patrols and hacking through security systems. Finally, they reached the mainframe. It was a monolithic structure, humming with power and secrets. The scarred man, Stephen, gave her a nod, and she inserted her custom-made device, a masterpiece of black market technology. The screens flickered to life, and the city's secrets lay bare before them. But they were not alone. A figure stepped out of the shadows, a corporate enforcer with eyes like ice chips. He had been waiting for them. The rebels tensed, weapons at the ready. "You're too late," he sneered. "The system's been locked down. You can't expose us." Dani's heart sank, but she didn't back down. "We'll find another way," she said, her voice firm. The enforcer raised his weapon, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "You should have stayed in the shadows," he said. "Now, you're just another glitch to be erased." The room went silent, the only sound the steady beat of the city's heart outside the window. Dani knew this was it. This was the moment that would determine the fate of their rebellion. But she wasn't going down without a fight. "You're wrong," she said, her voice cold. "You can't stop the signal. It's already been sent." The enforcer's smile faltered, and she watched the realization dawn in his eyes. He knew she was telling the truth. Panic flashed across his face, but before he could react, Stephen lunged forward, his fist connecting with the enforcer's jaw in a crack that echoed through the room. The battle was swift and brutal. The rebels had been preparing for this moment, and their desperation fueled their strength. Dani's hands danced over the keyboard as she rerouted power, disarming the tower's defenses. Sparks flew as circuits shorted and screens flickered, but she didn't stop, not even when the sound of gunfire filled the room. When it was over, the enforcer lay unconscious on the floor, his weapon clattering beside him. The rebels were bruised but victorious. Stephen looked at Dani with something akin to awe. "You did it," he said. "We're in." They worked together, their movements a blur of adrenaline and purpose. The encrypted data was uploaded to the city's network, ready to be broadcast to every screen and device. The truth would be revealed, and the corporation's reign of terror would begin to unravel. As they waited for the countdown, the tension in the room grew thick. Each tick of the clock was a silent promise of change. And then it was time. Dani hit the final key, and the screens around them burst to life. The corporation's propaganda was replaced by the damning evidence she had uncovered. The faces of the rebels, twisted in anger and hope, were broadcast alongside the images of the regime's crimes. The city's citizens would finally see the truth. The rebels cheered, but Dani's thoughts were elsewhere. She knew that this was just the beginning. The corporation would not go quietly into the night. They would retaliate, and the fight was far from over. But for now, they had taken the first step toward freedom. The screens outside the tower went live, the people's eyes widening as they took in the revelations. The whispers grew to shouts, the shouts to roars. The city was waking up. Dani felt the weight of her actions settle on her shoulders. She had started something that could not be stopped, a wildfire of change that would sweep through the city's streets. She had given the people hope, and she would not let it die. With the city in uproar, the rebels had to move quickly. They gathered their gear and slipped back into the night, the neon lights casting an eerie glow on their faces. The corporation's forces would be on high alert now, searching for the source of the breach. They had to stay ahead, stay safe, and keep fighting. As they disappeared into the shadows, the city's heartbeat grew stronger, a pulse of rebellion that resonated through every alleyway and neon-lit avenue. The corporation had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. The revolution had begun. Dani and the rebels returned to their hideout, a network of tunnels and makeshift rooms buried beneath the gleaming city streets. The once secretive group grew bolder by the minute, their numbers swelling with new recruits inspired by the hope of change. The corporation struck back with a fury that was as predictable as it was vicious. They sent their enforcers into the streets, their gleaming drones crackling with electricity as they sought to crush the burgeoning uprising. The city became a battleground of light and shadow, the neon glow pierced by the flash of weapon fire and the screams of the oppressed. In the depths of their underground lair, Dani worked tirelessly alongside the rebels, her mind racing to stay one step ahead. They had exposed the corporation's secrets, but now they had to organize, to strategize, to become more than just a disjointed group of malcontents. They had to become a force that could not be ignored. Stephen, who had taken on the mantle of the Phoenix, became their leader, his fiery spirit igniting the spark of rebellion within them all. Together, they plotted a series of attacks on the corporation's key installations, each one more daring than the last. The first strike was against a factory that churned out the drones that kept the city in check. The raid was swift and precise. The rebels' newfound unity and purpose evident in every action. They destroyed the assembly line, stole the prototypes, and vanished into the night, leaving chaos in their wake. The second target was a data hub that stored the personal information of every citizen, a tool of control that the corporation had used to keep the populace in line. The rebels infiltrated the building, wiping the servers clean and releasing the data into the ether, freeing the people from the chains of surveillance. The city was in turmoil, the lines between order and anarchy blurring with each passing day. The corporation's grip on power grew more tenuous, their once feared enforcers now hunted by the very people they had oppressed. Dani found herself at the forefront of the fight, her skills in hacking and technology becoming the linchpin of the rebellion's success. With every victory, her legend grew, and so did the bounty on her head. But she didn't care. This was her city, and she would do whatever it took to set it free. The corporation's retribution was brutal. They sent their elite forces, the Neon Hunters, to hunt down the rebels, and the city streets grew bloody with the conflict. But with each loss, the rebels only grew more determined, their rage a beacon that drew others to their cause. The final showdown was inevitable. The corporation had fortified their tower, a gleaming bastion of power that stood tall above the city, a symbol of their dominance. The rebels knew that if they could breach it, if they could bring down the tower, they could topple the regime. The plan was simple, a coordinated assault, with Dani leading a team of hackers to disable the tower's defenses from within while the rest of the rebel forces laid siege from the outside. It was a daring move, one that could either end in victory or a fiery defeat. The night of the final assault arrived, the air thick with tension. Dani took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the city's hope upon her shoulders. This was the moment she had been born for, the moment she had been preparing for her entire life. As the rebels moved into position, she slipped through the city's underbelly, her heart racing. The tower loomed above her, a gleaming sentinel that had stood unchallenged for too long. She knew that the battle ahead would be fierce, but she also knew that she was not alone. The city watched, its neon eyes blinking in anticipation. The people waited, their whispers of hope and fear echoing through the streets. The time for change was now, and Dani would be the spark that set the world alight. The tower's defenses were a labyrinth of digital locks and booby traps, but Dani danced through them with a hacker's grace. Her heart was a drum in her chest, each beat punctuating the clicks and hums of the system she bypassed. She felt the city's pulse quicken with every step she took towards the corporation's beating heart. The tower's innermost sanctum lay before her, a room filled with the hum of servers and the glow of screens. The corporation's elite, the ones who had pulled the strings for so long, were there. They were not expecting her, not expecting the girl from the shadows to breach their fortress. But she had come, armed with the truth and a burning desire for justice. They had underestimated her. They had underestimated all of them. The rebels outside were a tide of anger and determination, a force that could not be stopped. Dani's job was to open the gates from within. As the digital barriers fell before her, she could feel the tower's defenses crumbling. The screens around her flickered with the images of the rebellion, the faces of the people they sought to free. The corporation's elite looked on in horror, their grasp on power slipping through their fingers like sand. The final door opened with a hiss, and she stepped into the control room. The air was heavy with the scent of fear and the acrid tang of burnt circuits. The room was a fortress of screens and terminals, a bastion of power that had stood untouched for too long. Dani's eyes fell upon the master console, the nexus of the corporation's rule. She knew what she had to do. With trembling hands, she initiated the override sequence, the screens flickering as the city's systems responded to her command. Above her, the tower's defenses faltered. The Neon Hunters stumbled in their pursuit, their drones spiraling out of control. The city's heart raced, a wildfire of change sweeping through the streets. The moment of truth was upon her. With a deep breath, she hit the final button. The console erupted in a shower of sparks, and the tower's screens went dark. The city held its breath, waiting for the dawn of a new era. The silence was shattered by the sound of the first explosion. The tower trembled, the earth beneath her feet groaning in protest. The rebels had breached the outer defenses, and now the battle for the city's soul had truly begun. Dani felt a hand on her shoulder, and she turned to see the Phoenix, his scarred face a mask of pride and determination. "We did it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The people will know the truth. Together, they emerged from the tower's bowels, stepping out onto the battlefield that was the city they called home. The air was alive with the smell of smoke and the scent of freedom. The corporation's reign was coming to an end, and a new dawn was rising. The neon hunters fell back before them, their numbers dwindling as the people of the city rose up. The rebels' cries of victory filled the night, a symphony of liberation that drowned out the wails of the sirens. The corporation's leaders had retreated to their tower's peak, their last mainstay. Dani could see them through the glass, their faces a tableau of desperation. But it was too late for them. The city had awakened, and it would not be silenced again. The final battle was a dance of fire and steel, a clash of wills that would determine the future of the city. The rebels pushed forward, their numbers swelling as the tower's defenses crumbled. And then, a moment of stillness. The world held its breath as the tower's peak cracked, the glass shattering like a broken promise. The corporation's leaders fell, their reign of terror at an end. The city erupted in cheers, a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the tower. The neon lights flickered back to life, bathing the streets in a glow of hope and rebirth. The rebellion had won. Dani looked around her, the faces of her comrades a mix of relief and exhaustion. The city was theirs, but as the cheers grew louder, she knew that the battle was not truly over. The corporation had deep roots, and there would be those who clung to the shadows, waiting to strike again. The phoenix climbed atop the rubble of the tower, raising a fist to the sky. "People of the city," he bellowed, his voice a clarion call to the masses. "Tonight, we have taken the first step towards freedom. But the journey is long, and the road will be hard." The crowd fell silent, their eyes on the new leader. Dani felt a swell of pride, knowing that she had played a crucial role in bringing them to this moment. The city looked to the rebels, to her, for guidance in the days to come. But as the night grew quieter, the whispers grew louder. The corporation had left behind a legacy of fear and mistrust. The city's systems were in disarray, and chaos reigned in the power vacuum. The rebels had to act quickly to prevent a descent into anarchy. Dani and the Phoenix worked tirelessly, organizing the newly liberated citizens into a cohesive force. They had to rebuild the city's infrastructure, create a new government, and ensure that the corporation's influence was eradicated from every corner of their world. It was a task that seemed insurmountable, but they had faced worse. As the days turned to weeks, the city began to heal. The neon lights grew brighter, the streets cleaner. The people worked together, their unity a stark contrast to the years of division. Dani found herself at the center of it all, her skills and technology now a beacon of hope rather than a tool of rebellion. But in the quiet moments, when the city slept and the glow of the neon was muted by the shadows, she couldn't shake the feeling that their victory was a double-edged sword. The corporation had been defeated, but the scars it had left behind were deep. The city was a tinderbox, and it would take only a spark to set it alight again. The rebels had become the new rulers, and with power came responsibility. They had to navigate the murky waters of politics and diplomacy to ensure that the freedoms they had fought for were not lost to the very same forces they had overthrown. In the heart of the city, the tower stood as a reminder of what they had overcome. Its peak was a jagged, blackened scar, a monument to the fall of the old regime. And in the shadow of that scar, Dani knew that their work had only just begun. The city was alive with the sound of change, the rustle of new ideas, the cries of those who had been silenced for too long. Dani felt the weight of their gaze upon her, the expectations of a people yearning for a better life. The rebels had started something, and now they had to finish it. They had to forge a new future, one free from the chains of the past. It was a future filled with challenges, but she was ready. For the first time in her life, she felt truly alive. The city was hers to protect, to shape, to mold. And as she looked out over the gleaming horizon, she knew that she would do whatever it took to ensure that the people she had fought for could live in the light of freedom. The story of their rebellion was not over, but the next chapter was just beginning. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest stories. Give us a like if you want to see more, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts.